Hi guys. So I'm going to do something a little different today. I want to read something to you, which is why it's going to be the same video for all three of my classes. So I'm going to read something to you, but before we do that, just an update on for each individual class what we're sort of looking for. Now there's going to be no new material for either Latin class or for Lit. And if you'll notice on today's lesson plan, it's Monday the 20th. I just want you to reflect on that interview I put up last week. Okay, it's a Google form. Some of you have done it already. Just give me a short reflection, whether you watched the whole thing or just a few minutes of it. I'd love to hear from you about that. I certainly enjoyed the conversation and learned a lot. So hopefully you find it useful. So that's going to be homework, I guess, for tonight. Now, like I said, both Latin classes will get back into new material tomorrow. So just take it easy for tonight on that. For literature, for the seniors, I'll post a reading assignment in today's lesson plan, but I know several of you are well ahead in the reading anyhow. So that'll be all for tonight, and then again tomorrow back to new things. Okay, and so I'm going to read something to you about the imitation of Christ, although it's difficult because it's sort of via negativa. So what is the opposite of the imitation of Christ? That will help us show why it's important to imitate Christ. And it's something I was thinking about a lot this weekend. And it's good stuff. So this comes from a book called Deceit, Desire, and a Novel by René Girard. Some of you probably remember me talking a little bit about him. Now this will be difficult, especially for 9th grade, 8th grade, 7th grade, you guys, but I think you could still get something from it. So I don't have any qualms about reading this to you. And again, the overarching idea is the imitation of Christ as the only way to be happy in the world. And so I guess this is not a purely practical lesson. So if all you're looking for from my classes is to punch your time card, get your work done, and get your grade and get out, probably just want to stop the video. But if you'd like to learn about an idea that's challenging, have something to think deeply about for the rest of the day, maybe for the rest of the week, and if you want to encounter something that might sort of break you out of your buffered self a little bit, then watch on and come along with me. Society does not make the hero an untouchable. And when he says hero, he means the hero of a novel. He's writing about novels. He condemns himself. Why is subjectivity so charged with self-hatred? So why is the fact that you're a subjective individual, a subject, carry along with it this feeling of self-loathing? The underground man, it's from Dostoevsky, remarks that a cultivated and decent man cannot be vain without setting a fearfully high standard for himself, and without despising and almost hating himself at certain moments. But what is the source of these demands which the self cannot satisfy? They cannot originate in the self. Now, again, difficult writing, but what that means is, what do we long for? Where does it come from? How do we find it? Why do we always seem to go wrong too? What's the purpose of our lives? An exigency arising from the self and bearing on the self must be capable of being satisfied by the self. The subject must have placed his faith in a false promise from the outside. In Dostoevsky's eyes, the false promise is essentially a promise of metaphysical autonomy. Difficult phrase, but autonomy means alone, autonomous, self-sufficient, that sort of thing. And metaphysics has to do with your being. So the promise of metaphysical autonomy is the promise that, in some sense, you're going to be enough by yourself. And that's the big lie that these couple pages are going to be exposing. The lie that you'll find a way in your own life. You know, if you just fulfill your dreams and have enough stuff or enough popularity or enough pleasure or enough power, you'll be happy. That's the lie. For 2 or 3 centuries, this has been the underlying principle of every, quote, new Western doctrine. God is dead, man must take his place. Okay, so be careful there. Again, got to read closely. That's a critique. He's not triumphantly saying God is dead, man must take his place. Girard is saying here's how people have been trying to act for the last 100, 200 years, something like that. Trying to act as if God is dead and if man can take his place. And of course, we know that doesn't lead anywhere good, right? Pride has always been a temptation, but in modern times it has become irresistible because it is organized and amplified in an unheard of way. The modern, quote, glad tidings are heard by everyone. And I think maybe a good way to translate that phrase, the modern glad tidings, would be the idea that you can be enough by yourself. As long as, if you only would fulfill whatever it is you think you want, then that'll be enough and you'll be happy. That's the modern glad tidings, and it's a lie. It's a lie. The more deeply that lie is engraved in our hearts, the more violent is the contrast between this marvelous promise and the brutal disappointment inflicted by experience. As the voice of pride swells, the consciousness of existence becomes more bitter and solitary. So, and remember, pride is making yourself God, right? Making yourself the end of your own existence, filling yourself up and thinking that'll be enough. The more of that you have going on and the more hope you have in yourself, he's claiming that the more bitter and solitary your life will be, the more painful and alone you will feel. Yet this is common to all men. Why is there this illusion of solitude which doubles the agony? Why can men no longer alleviate their suffering by sharing it? Why is the truth about all men locked up in the deepest recesses of each individual consciousness? Each individual discovers in the solitude of his consciousness that the promise is false, but no one is able to universalize his experience. Okay, so the claim there is that everybody knows this. Everybody knows they're not enough on their own, and that it doesn't matter how much pleasure, money, power you accumulate, you're never going to be happy. Everybody knows this. Why can't we share it? Why can't we talk about it? Why do we keep propelling each other on toward idols, toward false gods? The promise remains true for others. Each one, every individual, believes that he alone is excluded from the divine inheritance and takes pain to hide this misfortune. Original sin is no longer the truth about all men, as in a religious universe, but rather each individual's secret, the unique possession of that subjectivity which broadcasts its omnipotence and its dazzling supremacy. I did not believe, remarks Dostoevsky's underground man, I did not believe it was the same with other people, and all my life I hid this fact about myself as a secret. Everyone thinks that he alone is condemned to hell, and that is what makes it hell. The more general the illusion, the more glaring it becomes. The farcical side of underground life is revealed in this exclamation of Dostoevsky's, quote, anti-hero. I am alone, and they are everyone. So grotesque is the illusion that a crack appears in nearly every existence created by Dostoevsky. In a brief moment of insight, the subject perceives the universal deception and can no longer believe its continuance. It seems to him that men will throw their arms around each other in sorrow. But this is an empty hope, and even the man whom it arouses soon becomes afraid that he has given away his horrible secret to the others. He is even more afraid of having betrayed it to himself. Okay, difficult stuff, but he's talking about our inability to finally let go and just admit that the only way we're going to be happy is living for others, living in relationship with others, making a self-offering of self-giving love all the time to everyone around you, and ultimately imitating Christ, because that's what Christ does, right? He pours himself out on the cross for us. We can't bring ourselves to admit that that's the only thing worth doing, right? We're afraid that we'll have nothing left if we do that. We're afraid that if we renounce our desires for pleasure, money, power, influence, all those things, if we renounce them, we'll have nothing left for ourselves. Well, what does the gospel tell us? Whoever tries to save his life is going to lose it, and whoever gives his life away for my sake will find it. The humility of a Mishkin, another Dostoevsky character, at first seems able to penetrate the armor of pride. The interlocutor opens his heart, but is soon overcome with shame. He loudly proclaims that he does not wish to change his being and that he is self-sufficient. There, right? Everyone's afraid to admit that they're not enough on their own, and people put up walls, armor, to protect their ego and to give themselves the illusion that they're autonomous, they're an individual, they're happy in and of themselves. And it's always a lie. It's always a lie. That's what Girard's saying. The more one, he is self-sufficient. Thus, the victims of the modern gospel become its best allies. So this is the modern gospel for Girard. He's writing this in 1960 something. But it's the promise that, again, you can have enough, you can be enough on your own in this life. You can be happy without others, and you don't need others. That's the modern gospel, and it's talking about its victims. And I think it's time for us to think about whether or not we're buying into that, or whether we've even thought about it. That's why I wanted to read this to you. It's because it's not something you even think about, like to question the idea that you'll be fulfilled by, say, for example, fulfilling your career. It almost feels sacrilegious to question that, but he's questioning it. And I think the Gospels question that as well. The more one becomes a slave, the more ardently one defends slavery. Pride can only survive with the help of the lie, and the lie is sustained by triangular desire. So seniors, and then I think Latin too, we've talked about triangular desire. The hero turns passionately toward the other person, who seems to enjoy the divine inheritance. So great is the disciple's faith that he perpetually thinks he is about to steal the marvelous secret from the mediator. He begins to enjoy his inheritance in advance. Here's a line for you. He shuns the present and lives in the brilliant future. He begins to enjoy his inheritance in advance, shuns the present, and lives in the brilliant future. So watch yourself for that kind of thinking. It's like, man, when I just get to college, then I can start being good. Then I'll be happy. Then things will work out. Man, if I just can have a relationship, once I find that perfect someone, then I'll be fine. Then I'll be happy. Then things will go well. You know, if only I can have the career I want. If only I can have this next video game. If only I can buy this snowboard, anything. It's all taking you out of the real world, which is the one that's right in front of you, like it or not. And there's no way around it. And trying to keep you preoccupied with some hypothetical future and some promise of again, this divine metaphysical autonomy at some point in the future. Nothing separates him from divinity, nothing but the mediator himself, whose rival desire is the obstacle to his own desire. A little bit more here. Dostoevsky's consciousness, like Kierkegaard's self, cannot exist without an external prop. It renounces the divine mediator only to fall back on the human mediator. Okay, so now we're explicitly into the imitation of Christ. The divine mediator, again, is Jesus Christ. He's the second person of the Trinity, and he has a human face. We can see him, which means we can imitate him. Okay, and Girard says if you don't do that, if you don't imitate him, you're going to imitate something else or someone else, because we have to imitate each other. It's the only way. It's the way human beings learn. Just as three-dimensional perspective directs all the lines of a picture toward a fixed point, either beyond or in front of the canvas, Christianity directs existence toward a vanishing point, either toward God or toward the other. Choice always involves choosing a model, and true freedom lies in the basic choice between a human or a divine model. Okay, we're going to read that last sentence again, because here's where it's all at. The imitation of Christ. Choice always involves choosing a model. You have to imitate someone. There's no way around it. You don't get to choose, I'm going to be myself, because you don't have any original ideas anyway. Everything we do and think about ourselves is in some sense learned from watching other people, starting with your parents and your friends and all that. So you don't get to not have a mediator. You don't get to not have a model who you're going to imitate. So choice always involves choosing a model, and true freedom. That's what we want, right? You want to be free, and not free like it's promised to us. Free to do whatever you want whenever you want it. Free to change your identity however you like. That's not freedom. That's only slavery if we're following Girard. True freedom, though, lies in the basic choice between a human or divine model. So what he's saying is you get to imitate Christ and be free or not. Anything else you choose is going to make you a slave. And eventually get you pretty well started on the path toward hell if you let it. So I love that. And maybe it's not really dark. It probably comes off as dark, but again, he's talking so much about the negative. But there's a positive way out in that last sentence we read. Imitation of Christ, if you want to be free. And then having come to that realization, you've got to go act it out now. You've got to go put it into action. And if you watched my conversation with Trey, that's one thing that I was so blown away by talking to him, is that if you say I'm a Catholic, if you say I'm a Christian, it doesn't mean anything unless you're putting it into action. You don't get to be a Christian in your head. I think that's a really, really key point, and it's something like I certainly got that wrong for a long time. And once you realize that, then your daily vocation becomes very clear. It's like, what would Christ do now? What should I do now? There's always something virtuous you could be doing, and nothing in your head's real until you put it into action with the moral life, I think. And I believed him here listening to him talk, because that's how it worked with football. If you say I want to be a great player, here's what great players do: put it into action, put it on film. Why should that not work with the spiritual life? And why should that not work with the gospel promises of happiness? Okay, put it into action, imitate Christ, and see what happens. Because if you're like me, you've hardly ever tried actually doing that, so it's not very useful to say, I already believe, I already know, yeah, Jesus is the answer. We're good, nothing new here. I don't think that's the right way to think, because I think very few of us actually consciously, diligently act out the imitation of Christ in our own lives. And maybe it's time to try. So that's what I was thinking about over the weekend. It seemed good enough to do for class. So I hope you get something out of that, at least something to think about for the day. And again, just check the Monday lesson plan for homework, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Get back to normal classes. God bless.